Honestly unbalanced.
I want to begin with how good you look. You are now a unit. Like when I last saw you, not saying you weren't a unit, but
Yeah.
you were smaller. There was as I have a bit of a kind of a dad bod vibe going on with the belly. I know not a dad, but there was a dad bod vibe, and I think we're both semi naked in a sauna. So you're really into weights at the moment, and
Love it.
we'll talk
Yeah.
about that broadly. Is this the first time in your life you've been massively into weights, had a proper routine, or has there been other periods? And why now have you decided to stack yourself out?
Okay. Well, I discovered martial arts at 18 as my sort of main thing. And I did a little bit of weight training around that. I did body weight pretty regularly through most of my martial arts. But Asian martial arts are often quite, particularly Aikido, is quite down on sort of strength training. And with a few exceptions like Gojo-Ryu Karate, it's not so big on strength training. So I wasn't super into it, but I did a bit in the background. And I was also kind of a snob. I preferred sort of yoga and conscious dance and like sort of conscious things, inverted commas, and Asian things, the sort of exotic, erotic, other. Um, and I did get into weightlifting for a few years on my journey because I'm always doing different things. But 3 or 4 years ago, I got very into it because of the simplicity of it, running a sort of fairly complex personal growth business, dealing with trauma and all these things I work with day to day, I realized that it was incredibly refreshingly simple to just go to a gym. And I sort of got past the kind of weird, oikophobic, self-hating snobbery I had around sort of Western practices, as it were, um, and realized I loved it, loved how it made me feel. And I basically did a 3 year bulk where I just didn't quite realize that it would make me hungry and just ate a shitload. And then at a certain point, I went, hang on a minute. I've got loads of strength now. I'm, much stronger. This is really helping me in my middle age. I'm really enjoying it. But I want to look nice, just aesthetically. And also, I started working with young men and using the gym as what I call an embodied practice, as a practice for personal growth and for coaching, because they don't want to do normal coaching or yoga or therapy, but they'll go at the gym. So I thought, you know what, I better look the part. So it gave me that little bit of extra motivation to just sort of take off the fluff that was on top of the muscle I'd spent a few years building. So yeah, that's the basic journey there.
What did you perceive to be kind of the mental health benefits or the mental development benefits of going to the gym? There's a simplicity to some degree, kind of in the movement, and certainly you get into
Yeah.
the zone and you get the pump. But what were the non-physical benefits to it?
Well, recently I Googled this because I've been sort of talking about my personal experience. I thought, you know what, I better look up the evidence base. And with, good AIs, Perplexity and things, I looked it up and the evidence base was surprisingly broad and robust for the mental health benefits of strength training. There's different bodies of research. Sometimes it's under exercise and you have to split it, but increased confidence, reduced anxiety, even improved cognition. Like it makes you smarter. There's a really robust evidence base for that. And this is just going into the gym and throwing iron around. And then if you apply, what I've learned from 25 years in embodiment and martial arts and meditation and yoga, you apply that stuff to it, all of a sudden, while there's no research base on this yet, the benefits are massively increased. So yeah, I could list them, but it's almost like I'd say for anyone with just normal bad mental health, as opposed to like, seriously
Mm.
pathological, there are people who it won't benefit. But most people today have, unfortunately, not great mental health. And for those, a bit of anxiety, a bit of depression, a bit of self-esteem issues, those kind of things, it's fantastic. And, that's been my personal experience, but also, the evidence base does back that up.
And if you're looking at a side note for good evidence, like based answers to your questions like that,
Yeah.
there's a new AI platform called Consensus.
Okay.
And what it does is just take academic papers, like over 2 million peer-reviewed academic papers, and
Nice.
it
I'll look it
and it
up.
and it will answer
Census.
consensus, yeah, and it will answer those questions really well. So the getting boys into the it sounds a bit like grooming, slightly.
It's a weird thing. The fact that we're in a culture that says that is actually very sad. I mean, the
So,
fact that we think of mentoring relationships, it's like if you say Catholic Church, people kind of have this weird response, right? Which I feel so sorry for the vast majority of Catholics who are, completely normal, healthy people. And the same with that. And it says something about our culture that we're suspicious of all relationships of support that aren't either financial or sexual.
Mm.
And like mentoring is the most normal thing. And I've actually, it's interestingly, spent most of my career working with middle-aged women because that's who comes to personal growth workshops, which is fine. And I spent the last 2 years in Ukraine running a charity, which was mostly young women because the men were off fighting and the young women were the new psychologists I was working with. And I just thought, you know what, I want to work with a different population. One of my assistants noticed that young men would respond very positively to me in, in wider workshops, and I would have a lot of energy for it and enjoy it. And I've always thought it's good to follow where your energy is that way. And I've actually found it the easiest thing in the world working with young men. There's a sort of natural listening that they want to, they're desperate usually for male attention, and they want to listen to someone who isn't their dad if they've got a dad. Um, and it's just so easy. And then the gym makes it even easier. I think for a couple of reasons. One is you can directly change straight state. So like I could coach someone on the phone into being more confident, but if you're doing an overhead press, try being depressed. I mean, there's only so many overhead. You just can't do it. It's just chemically, physiologically, and embodiment wise contradictory. So you can directly change state. The other thing I think the young men like about it is it's not too focused and direct. So the average counselor will give someone their full attention. That's basics of, say, Rogerian counseling, therapy, whatever. But that's not what the average teenage boy wants. And I heard a lot of mums saying, actually, this started because mums kept asking me to take their teenage boys to the gyms. Like, there's a bunch of single mums I know and lesbian couples I know, and they kept saying, hey, my boy needs someone. Can you take him to the gym? He likes you, And I actually was, first of all, they were saying, can you just give my boy advice? And I was like, well, I can't just sit him down and talk to him,
Yeah.
but I can take him to the gym because then we're doing something. And the mums would often say they have their best conversations with the teenagers in the car. And I'm like, yeah, because you're not staring at them. It's not too much attention. It's side by side doing something together, going somewhere together. And with the guys, because of the state changing element of the gym, which we've all felt the pump, we've all had that good, good vibes from the gym. Because of that, plus the fact that it's not too intense, it's not too continuous and psychological. I'm not asking them about their feelings too much. And they really enjoy it. And I've had a bunch of young guys say, this is way better than counseling. My mum sent me to a counselor. I didn't like it. I did one session and then quit. And it's just way more casual.
And there is an element as well of them actually getting objective success. While they're getting subjective development, they are getting stronger. They are getting a pump in the moment. In the gym mirrors, the biceps will look bigger after half an hour.
There's a few things there. So one is aesthetics are a thing and they do matter. We shouldn't overhype aesthetics, but people like aesthetics. And a strong person is a healthy person, is an attractive person. I don't know why that's politically incorrect to say that's the most normal fucking healthy thing in the world. So they get healthier, they get more aesthetic, there's confidence there. Second thing is chemically, they're just changing their state, right? As I said, it's hard to be unconfident after having done overhead press. It's just changing their biology. Third thing you also point to, which there's an objective difference that they can measure. So this is one of the things I love about weightlifting compared to, you see a lot of yoga degenerated into how far can you stretch. Why? Because stretching is objective. You could see I couldn't touch my toes and now I can. So it has that in our Western culture for better and worse is sort of focusing around the objective and giving people that objective feedback. Like recently, my girlfriend started coming with me to the gym recently, right? And it only took her a couple of weeks, and she was like, "Oh, I used to lift, 10. Now I can lift 15." And you can see her get really. This is a very mature, well-traveled, speaks 6 languages, educated woman, but you can see the excitement of the concrete improvement. And in this sort of abstract, crazy, weird postmodern world, that is very satisfying to people.
You said earlier about the best conversations I had with the boys in the car. I think it's a male thing, isn't it? That men looking into each other's eyes can be quite confrontational,
Aggressive.
and they found that it happens also for gay men in relationships. That in restaurants they would tend to prefer sitting side to side, whereas often heterosexual
Yeah.
couples will tend to face each other.
Yeah, French people also do that in restaurants because they can judge people. It's a lot of fun. I used to have a French partner. I used to sit in a cafe in Paris and judge people's fashion as they walk by. So yeah, it's called third point, right? So it's like, hey, this is 2 point, like what we're doing now, and it's like, well, are we going to fuck each other or fight each other? And I don't really want to do either of those things with you, so it's a bit weird. Whereas third point, and you can think of that metaphorically, like right now, me and you are making a podcast together. That's the third thing that it's like the car that we're working on together. We're doing this
Mm.
project called making a good podcast episode. And that takes the pressure off the intimacy, makes it a bit less vulnerable. I think it's teenagers generally, but men also. It's like, let's go kill that antelope over there. That's how we bond. We bond around doing stuff together, not around. I mean, like all of therapy is feminine, right? I know this is going to offend some people, but fuck them. Like, tell me about your feelings. It's like, no, let's do something together and then we'll have a sense of connection, maybe. Then the conversations will come up, and naturally, good conversations do come up. But it's around doing rather than relating. Like, relating is hell.
Reflecting back onto my childhood in an all boys school from like 3 to 18, and the biggest bonding moments, the biggest times that there is actual deeper discussion were always on like the camping trips or the CCF cadet expeditions, where
Yeah.
we would be doing something, often something that involved struggle.
Challenge, shared challenge, and even shared suffering. I mean, there is an amount of calibrated, undamaging suffering in the gym.
Mhm.
In terms of the skills you're building in the gym, and this is true of a hard yoga practice or hard martial arts practice too, you're building the skill of overcoming something difficult. And young men particularly don't want to be told you're brilliant and you're fine and they're there. That's a very mothering approach. What they want is a challenge that makes them stronger. And that also, as you say, tends to bond people.
The crowdfunder you've got going on. So just tell people about what that is doing.
Oh, by the time this comes out, it might be over. We've raised a bunch of money, which is great. What we realized was we want to get the word out about this approach. I'd already started a YouTube channel. I've, got an editor for that, and I'm wanting to reach lots and lots of young guys. There's basically two ways to that. One, as one mum said, better you than Andrew Tate was her take on it in terms of the sort of positive message we were putting out. And people don't realize like your equipment in your podcast studio, some of this stuff's quite expensive. Having good editors is quite expensive. Making things successful is quite expensive. I hire people. There's only so much I can do. There's editors and people like that. Even photographers for the visual imagery. And then the second side of it is in real life is like, okay, can I, one of the things I want to do is do a session for PTs. So actually train, there's a PT in London who's very interested in hosting this. We want to subsidize it, where I train a bunch of PTs and get them kind of spreading this in the non-virtual world. Much as I love the virtual world for its numbers and reach, there's something about, taking young guys actually to the gym. Like I do most weekends, I do that. So it's very easy. As I said, it started off with friends. They'd be just like, talk to my boy. And I'd say, well, take him to the gym, tell him to be at, Falcon Fitness at 10 a.m. on a Sunday. And mums were really surprised, actually. The boys would turn up like early on a Sunday morning, and stuff like that. It was, I've done it in a few countries, but the crowdfund is just raising funds to be able to do that more effectively. Because at the moment, it's a bit of a side project from, my main work is training embodiment coaches. And I've always had a side project, and the Ukraine one was great. And that kind of wrapped up recently, which was, a nice achievement. And I was really happy about. And I thought, you know what? It's always good to have some project aside from your main business.
And outsourcing work, you're very good at that, of like having a team around you, having assistants. I listened to actually a wonderful episode of Chris Williams' podcast. Williamson, you've been
Oh,
on
yeah.
his podcast. He's been on ours ages ago. I don't like to take credit for his
He's
success.
done well. He's done well.
Oh, he has done well. He has done very well. But this guy was all about valuing your own time. And
Yes.
actually, if you want a happy life, you need to outsource, etc., and do it intelligently. Have you always outsourced to the degree you do now? Have you always made that a priority? And what's your approach to doing that?
Yeah, I mentor quite a lot of people who run businesses. I rent or mentor young people who are up and coming embodiment trainers or have gyms and different things. And I've actually found there's no solution here. There are a couple of principles though, because I've been a one-man band. I've had 25 employees, a kind of medium-sized company with a couple of £1 million turnover, and now I have like 5 full-time people and a few other odd job kind of people. And there's pros and cons to each of those. And I know some very successful people who made a lot of money and have a very nice life as a one-man band. And that suits some people. For me, though, my main principle is I want to outsource everything I don't love or am brilliant at.
Mm.
So I really enjoy being on podcasts. So I certainly don't want to outsource this. I probably couldn't outsource it, but it's something I enjoy. Um, I've got someone doing most of my copywriting because I don't really enjoy that, but I do need to check it. So I'm sort of irreplaceable, at least at the last stage. I'm teaching a workshop tomorrow, which I love. I wouldn't want to just have, trainers doing workshops for me and me taking a percentage. But there's other things like I haven't booked a flight in over 15 years. I don't know how to book a flight anymore. I think I booked a hotel room a couple of times last minute when I got stuck somewhere and my PA was asleep or something. But other than that, I haven't booked, a hotel room, flight. I have a cleaner, and I didn't, I grew up fairly working class. My mum found out I had a cleaner and she was outraged. And I tried to explain to her, like, look, this is about 3 hours a week of stuff, just my washing. And, she's a very sweet Brazilian lady. And I always try and be nice to her and got a good, lend a book so she can learn English and all the rest of it. But she doesn't mind cleaning. It's a job that fits her as a mum, and she does a few hours. I don't mind when she does it. And I really don't like cleaning. And so I'd rather not do something I don't like. And if I was to say, what's my hourly rate? I sell coaching. My packages start like $2,000, right? For a few sessions, for 4 sessions. So it's like, if I'm gonna, anything that's cheaper than that actually makes sense that I'd not be doing myself, unless I get, like, I like to cook. There's some relaxation that I get from cooking. So I don't just want to get meals to come in, there's some other value of that. But I think people don't value their own time enough. The only issue with getting employees is you can become a manager. Like, I spend about half a day a week managing, and I don't like managing, and I'm not great at it. Right. When I had 25 employees, it was more like 2 days a week just managing. I've got a tricky issue with one of my employees at the moment, and it stressed me out today, man. I never get stressed out about teaching. So I want to minimize. So I realize, like, I don't really want to be the boss of a big company, even though I have a friend that has a similar company who employs more people. He makes a lot more money than me because of this economy of scale in certain industries. But I realize I don't want to be him because it's miserable for me managing. I hate it, and I'm very average at it.
And I like the idea that anything that you're not particularly competent at, people often try and get good at. I don't know. It depends on the background. Like my kind of like working class, guilty Catholic background is if you can't do it, get good at it. And actually, the best thing to do is just abandon it and just give it to someone else who is far better that you give it to someone else who's competent than you spend all of your time getting slightly more competent than you currently are.
Yeah, you have to be careful with that because you could get kind of narrower and narrower in your skill set. Like, I've
Mm.
hosted 600 podcast episodes. I've accidentally got reasonably good at interviewing people now. I'm not kind of the level of Joe Rogan or, a real professional from Channel 4 or something, but I'm pretty good at interviewing people. That was an accidental skill, but I always enjoyed podcasts, so I didn't mind learning that skill. But yeah, I'm a big believer in getting a professional in, man. If the plumbing's broke, I don't want to spend 10 hours learning how to do the plumbing. I've got a leaking tap. I can call a bloke up and get him to sort it in half an hour. Like, I'd be crazy not to.
And there's
So
there's always a balance to be found, isn't there? Like
there it is.
I often have the guilt of I know it's easier to order from Amazon rather than spend 20 minutes driving to a shop, supporting a local business. And I'm torn. Like
Yeah,
part of
yeah.
me wants to do that, but equally part of me knows that I can just order what I need to do, and that will save me an hour for that bubble wrap that costs £10. That costs £10.
Ease normally wins. If you run a business, that's really worth understanding that ease is the factor that often wins in a lot of behaviorally, that's really important too. A lot of things like habits come down to ease.
You run ethical marketing courses, not for quote crystal shaggers. So you run these courses, and I would love to know your approach on ethical marketing because I as an English person, I'm always
Yes.
torn on that. I find Americans, sorry Americans, but sometimes the language that is used by Americans marketing promises quite a lot. There's lots of like American yoga
But it's
teachers I
cultural,
see.
cultural. It's very
It's
cultural.
yeah, and it's do this and out. This will change your life. This will transform your business. Join this yoga teacher training and become a new person. I promise. I can't do that. And I know that
Yeah.
I would make so much more money if I was willing and comfortable of making such statements.
Maybe. I mean, there's always been a pressure to be full of shit to make money or to get laid more or to get more status. We could be talking about Instagram status grabbing as well, right? There's always been a pressure against our ethics to do something which is expedient, to do something which will get us something. So there's that element to it, but then there's another element to it, which is authenticity. That and there is a big cultural thing here that Brits just don't like bullshit. Germans don't either. Russians certainly don't. Like, I worked a lot in Russia in the past before the war, and it's marketing has to be culturally adapted both to yourself and to the others. The other one is the demographic. Like yoga people have got different value sets. Like you could measure it. They've got different value sets than the average person, right? Like so there's a bunch of variables about who you are and who you're talking to. That means if you try and copy someone else's marketing, it's probably going to be rubbish, you know. And there's a couple of people in this space, George Kao, Kao, or Tad Hargrave, Marketing for Hippies, that I get, you know, I guest teach with and I work with a lot. They're on my mentoring programs, for example, and they've got, you know, those two have got quite different approaches just because they've got different personalities. But they're both very different than any normal American marketing book you'll pick up. And they're, you know, one's from Canada and one's from the US, even though he's Chinese American. And they're not classically like gung-ho Americans in that sense because they've got different values.
So what is at the crux of ethical marketing in these courses that you teach?
Well, I mean, it's probably an hour download, but I mean, some of the basics would be look for the fit rather than the sell. So, you know, like you made a joke about like I literally say on my courses, no crystal shaggers. So the reason I do that is that I don't want people to come to my courses who are a bad fit. Like we send out a warning email ahead of my live workshops saying like, look, if you're easily offended, if you're some blue-haired woke cunt from fucking Berlin or Portland, just please don't turn up. Okay. And that the reason we do that, you'd say, oh, that's the worst thing for marketing. You're not selling something. But I want my people to turn up. I want the people who are going to be a good fit for me. And it's kind of like think of romance as an analogy. Are you actually looking for a long-term relationship that works for both people, or are you just trying to get laid as many times as you can in a nightclub on a Saturday night? Right? Like both are, you know, two approaches, but they're very different. And you would treat dating very differently if you were looking for that more long-term relationship. So another one would be the embodied side of it. Like, am I creating a state of anxiety in people? Buy this bleach now, your children will get germs and die. If you don't get this dandruff shampoo, then everyone will hate you and you won't get any girls and you'll die lonely. It's like, am I trying to create anxiety? Or a lot of my marketing is humorous, right? Like I'm actually trying to create joy. I'm trying to have people laugh and just, you know, my people will look at what I say. I say my people, I mean the people that would enjoy my coach training, for example, and they'll see my marketing and they'll maybe face palm and they'll laugh and they're, you know, they're having a better day. They're not having a worse day. So the somatic state would be another part of it. Just plain honesty, I think, is in there. Just not lying, because basic ethics around stuff like that. I mean, you know, that's simple. And there's always pressures. So yeah, I mean the whole people can look up my stuff online on this, and mostly it's a sideline. I was just teaching coaches embodiment, and then you know I would say to them, look, it's the last day of the course. I better teach you how to sell this. And I'm not exactly, you know, I'm not from a business family, but I learned the hard way. I was like, hey, I want to survive and do my business and I want to live the life I want to live. And I learned sort of the hard way that the mainstream approach didn't work very well. So I looked up people like George and Tad, and then I just passed that on to students. So it tends to be like the last day of a course or a few, you know, like an odd workshop a year, but it's not my main thing.
There's there's two interesting angles to you and the way you work. In that part of you is this kind of completely honest, take it or leave it. If you don't like it, piss off. But then at the same time, you're remarkably good at building community, getting people like on like big names, let's say, on your podcast, getting people on board with book launches and spreading the word. How do you do both? Like, what's your mental approach to drawing people in?
Well, you can't. So what people really want is to be totally authentic, but be loved by everyone. And that's not going to fucking happen. So you do have to make some choices. Okay. And there's a lot of big names who won't ever work with us ever again and hate me. So, you know, like that, I'd say what I'm genuinely quite disingenuous. I often just reach out to people and say, hi, do you want to come on the podcast? This is what we do. And, you know, interested in coming on. Sometimes we use clever strategies. Like there's a guy at the moment called Michael Malice who does great podcasts. And he put his home address out, said the US government can send him anthrax. So because I want him on the podcast, we didn't get a response when we emailed him. So we're sending him an anthrax CD. And the anthrax CD would say, look, here's some anthrax, try not to die. Would you please come on our podcast? You know, we once sent Esther Perel a dozen red roses, you know, like there's things you can do that are fun, that are, you know, part of the game, as it were. But mostly it's just pretty straightforward. And there is a price to be paid for being yourself and having opinions that not everyone likes. There is a price to be paid for that. But I don't want to play the violin too loudly because there's a price to be paid for not doing that. So pick your cost, really.
And is the you that you put out there on these courses, on the workshops, the narratives on the website, do you feel that is you, the facilitator, as a separate person, a slight mask or an exaggerated version? And is there a separate you? So if people are annoyed or angry, are they angry at persona, or are they angry at you as an individual? And if they're angry at the persona, does that mean you don't care and you can stay detached from it?
I mean, you just asked a question about identity that's pretty philosophical. As a Buddhist, I could say there is no true self, and who are there? I mean, mostly people are angry at their own silly, wild projections. Like all the people that hate Trump, right? It's because they're not owning their inner greed and narcissism. It's just shadow projection. It's not to say he's a great guy, but they're adding to that. The Trump derangement is coming from their own disownment. And I get a lot of disown masculinity or disown this or that. That's part of the cultural main, unfortunately. So some of it's wild projection. I think we do have personas, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like when I used to work with kids, my name was Mr. Fluffy, and Mr. Fluffy's quite loud and a bit more like, hey, hi, kids, And it's nice to put that persona down at the end of the day of working with kids. I used to do PGL and stuff. But Mr. Fluffy was still part of me. Like I still love Mr. Fluffy, and I can get Mr. Fluffy out when I'm with my niece and nephew, and they have a nice time running around the park. So it's not fake. This idea of looking for a true self is this sort of platonic Western idea, which doesn't actually make much sense. I think. What I would say is, are the selves integrated? Like you've got to be careful, because I started to develop a bit of a persona on Facebook that wasn't very good for me. And I was like, you know what, this isn't who I want to be. This isn't my best self. And, I'm off Facebook at the moment, partly as a result of that. I just think, you know what, I don't want to build that persona. So I think you do have to be careful, personas. The thing I would say is when students have hung out with me, like long term, like socially, like I had students stay at my house or whatever, they don't say, oh, you suddenly become another person. Right. Of course, it's a bit less loud or a bit less teachery, but I'd say that's usually a healthy sign. It's like you got married, right? Getting married's fucked up, because when you get married, everyone with all these different personas, all is in the same room at once. And you have to kind of figure out how those personas fit together, because all of a sudden everyone's in the same room and you've got to do a speech, right? So if they're too different, that's going to be a head fuck. But if they're a bit different, I think that's normal.
I advise that to anyone that does courses with me, mentoring courses, that you want in a dream world the person they meet on social media to be the same person they meet live in person, and the same person they chat to in a changing room or in a coffee shop. And for me, the only difference is in class, I'm less brummy, perhaps. I articulate myself a little. I try and have a better voice,
Yeah.
and that's it. That's the only difference, really. There's not a wild difference. Maybe there's a retreat Adam that's a little bit more
Do
spiritual
you scratch your balls in private?
in public.
Okay, but most people don't do that in public, right? So I think it's also okay to have private and public.
In downward dog, you're allowed to. No one can
In
see.
Downwards Dog, no one can see. Yeah, you got my point though, right? Like, here's another example of that. All the fucking influencers crying on TikTok and
No,
Instagram. Stop it. It's a private thing. If you're going through an emotional process, I interviewed someone yesterday who knows me quite well, and he said what might surprise listeners about me is that I don't share everything. Right, like a year ago I split up with my wife, and I'm just starting to talk about that gently. It's been a year. For a year, I didn't say anything on socials, anything like that, because sometimes things need a private container for dignity and for healing and for just well-being. And you can be bleeding edge as well as leading edge in your own kind of oversharing. So I think it's more become the issue. People are like, they think being authentic means sharing everything all the time. I think that's nonsense.
Is it authentic? Is it real? Yeah, I'm not a fan of I think everything you put out there has to have a why behind it. And you crying on social media, especially when we all know that a camera has been set up for that moment,
Right.
and it's being either a continued moment or a restage moment. I can't understand the person's why, unless the why is just to get sympathy, and then what value is
Well, I
that?
often hear people say things like, well, this helps people be more vulnerable and show that emotion, but it's not. It's all bollocks. It's just emotion porn for women. It's nonsense.
Maybe guys kind of get into it as well, depending on the guy. What's your you do so much. like even in your free time, you're taking men to like boys to the gym. You do a lot with your time that is work related or side project related. You said you got a girlfriend now. Like, at what do you think in any way work and ambition has got in a way of the things that you actually want to do personally with your life, or how have you navigated the balance, and has that shifted
Yeah.
at all?
Yeah, good. So first of all, I think I'm 45. I was 45 last week, and I being 45 is not the same as being 25. I think if you're 25, particularly if you're a bloke, you need to find what brings a sense of purpose to you and work psychotically hard at it, because that's how you get ahead. And there's no such thing as work-life balance. The other thing I'd say is we have this concept of like work versus life, like work-life balance, right? It's a very strange concept to me. When I'm at work, I don't want to feel like I'm not alive, like I'm not living. It's work life, right? In that sense. And this really comes from industrialization, perhaps, this idea that we're at work and I'm getting paid, so it must be meaningless. Quite the opposite. So if people say you work a lot, I'm like, no, I live a lot. And some of that is paid, like your workshop I'm doing tomorrow. Some of it's not paid, like the work with the boys or the Ukraine stuff, it's little or no pay. Some of it is relaxing, some of it is, it's not that I would always want to be teaching a workshop. I want to be sitting in the spa in northern Italy like I was last week sometimes, right? Like there's a yin and yang necessary for health. Um, for me, it's kind of a loser perspective to think of life as like a job you have to do and then recovering from that on holiday in Ibiza or lying on the couch. I'd rather just have a flow of yin and yang, and I enjoy both sides of it. And I think when I was younger, I definitely did more doing and a bit less just hanging out. um, but what else are you going to do with your life? Seek, I mean, like, what is the point of life if not to contribute in some way that's meaningful? Were you going to seek hedonism or just try and distract yourself until you're 90 and you die of cancer? I don't get why you would do anything else.
And what do you, so you've gone through some business changes. You said you kind of downsized, as it were, a while back. What do you want more of in your life?
I want a dog, first of all. I
What
saw
type? What type?
German Shepherd and Alsatian. Yeah, German Shepherd. That's what I had when I was a kid. Got puppy jealousy right now. I'd like my own kids, so the dog would be a warm up. I want a normal life. I want a house in the countryside, probably in Slovenia. I'm living in the UK countryside, but I think the UK is a decadent culture and it's not going anywhere good. I'd rather live in the mountains of Slovenia in the
It's
woods
stunning. Yeah.
with a wife and dog and kid. I spend quite a lot of time out there. I do workshops out there. Got to know the culture a little bit. I like it a lot. It's a nice balance of sort of tough Eastern European, pleasure, sort of Italian, Southern European, and but organized Austrian, North European. It's a nice balance. So I'm probably moving out there, and I just want a bit more like normal life. I want a lot less EasyJet. I've been traveling around Europe and the world for a long time teaching. I'm just refusing to do that now. So a bit more stability. Um, yeah, I want to build a weights room and a dojo and teach my courses online from the woods. That's my dream, man.
That's a nice dream. And and I think I've not got that, but I've got my little gym, etc. And I think it's important actually to acknowledge as well when you take the steps in the right direction. I think anyone that's driven with a business or a life, anyone of that personality type often doesn't take the moment to actually appreciate like where you've got to. And I'm certainly guilty of that. Not appreciating where I've got. What are you particularly appreciating about where you're at the moment?
Gratitude's been a long-term practice for me. I love that I live by the river here in the west of England. I do my coaching calls like walking through the woods by the river. It's fucking great. I do that every day. I love that. I love that I have access to literally a world-class gym because there's a mixed Mr. Olympia contender who happens to live in my tiny ass little town. So it's like super world-class equipped gym with a Dorian Yates lap machine and everything you could want. Um, I'm grateful for the fact that I'm well. I wasn't healthy last year. I started to burn out from Ukraine stuff and different things, and made a decision last December. I said, you know what? What's the point if you're not well? So I reprioritized that. I think it's the only thing more important perhaps than life purpose. Because you're dead, you can't do anything, right? So like it feels good to be well, to be attractive, to have energy. I've got two interviews back to back today, and I'm not like, oh God, it's Friday afternoon. I've got two interviews. I'm like, okay, cool. I've still got energy. Great. And I'm teaching tomorrow. Okay, cool. So I'm definitely grateful for that. Anyone who has an Italian girlfriend and isn't grateful is spiritually bankrupt. So definitely grateful for that. I won't name her because she's a bit private, but she knows who she is. So yeah, I mean, they're my sister, niece, mum still talk to me. You know, these are the things to be grateful for, right? The basics.
And what do you have going on soon? 'Cause I know you've got a hard exit, but what do you have going on where people can find you? You're in Austria soon. I think there's some spaces left in
Yeah,
there.
yeah, Vienna. Where else? Amsterdam, beginning end of the year. Berlin, the next beginning next year, and then loads of stuff in Slovenia after that because I don't want to travel so much. And it's a great country to visit if you want to do a live retreat. Online, we do something called Embodied Toolkit, which is a short course. Listeners might be in time for that. And we do a coach training, the certificate of embodiment coaching. That's our main coach training. And that's a really good course. That's every February. So we've already got 50 people booked on that. It's plenty of lead time.
Nice.
So that's our sort of main thing, I guess we're known for, is the coach training. And yeah, if there's PTs out there, people that lift weights are interested in the new project, they can get in touch. You know, that's it'll be good to hear from people who understand what I'm talking about and like the idea.
And then I'm not sure I agree with this question, to be honest, but
Yeah,
I thought of it about legacy. And I'd like to ask you kind of what legacy would you like to leave? Because you are doing so much
sure,
education, but
sure.
at the same time, I find the idea of legacy a little bit egocentric. And, we'll be dead and you'll be forgotten within a few generations. But as best as you want to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, I've already built some things that are legacy, right? So the certificate embodiment coaching will continue, I think, for many, many years with other teachers. I only teach a quarter of it myself. So that's a thing I've built that I think will continue. There's books I've written that will continue. The project in Ukraine is definitely a part of a legacy. That continues without me now, which was always the plan, 2-year plan. And like that is, when I get to the pearly gates and I'm trying to blag my way in, that'll be the one thing I can probably hold up and say, yeah, but come on. So it's nice to have done something you feel like. There's a saying: a man should be ashamed to die before winning a few victories for mankind. And that was the first one where I went, okay, that feels genuine and a good thing. What I'd really like to before I die, other than have kids and walk my dog a lot, would be to create a system of meaning that gives young men a reason to live and something to die for in Western civilization. Like that's my
Ooh,
life project. That's the thing I think's missing. That's the root of all the problems.
I would agree with that. Awesome.
Is that a big
So,
enough answer?
yeah, no, like
As a
it, like
British
it.
person, I'm almost embarrassed to give such a big answer.
Thank you so much for your time. It's been awesome to chat as always, and enjoy the rest of your podcast today.
Total pleasure, mate. Nice to see you.
Honestly unbalanced.